I'm on.
Hey man, I am on. Greetings to you from where am I? I'm in Kentucky right now. I'm actually at kids camp. So yeah, feeling pretty good. I'm in my Centra Kid orange right now. Uh
Awesome.
yeah.
I mean, I didn't think they let guys your age into these camps. I mean, that's pretty good. You
Orange is
sound
for
like
the leader. Thank you very much. So
okay.
yeah, so we have got a little bit of time. We're at Campbellsville University. And so uh one of our colleges out here, and great little place. Good, food's good. So feeling good, ready to have
Well,
this
the
OTXNT.
the provost at Campbellsville will be the president of Wayland in just about 10 days,
Look at
11
that.
days.
So this
So,
is, hey, I
yeah.
like what I see here. It's been good. It's my second year being at Campbellsville. So a lot of fun for sure. This is a pretty facility I'm in. So
Yeah.
Wi-Fi strong. We're able to do this though. And we needed to do this, right? Because it's been a week, little more than a week since we had the Southern Baptist Convention. So, it's time to have a debrief, right? To have a little bit of a talk about what happened last week.
Yeah. We've kind of started making this a standing OTXNT, the post SBC annual meeting. So yeah, let's jump in. I know you've got limited time, so let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll tell you all what happened. Please
Yeah, let's do it.
join me in the Lord's Prayer, if you will. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, Dr. Pate, we had a number of things that we were looking at going into this meeting, and I didn't win all the votes I was hoping to win. I was a little sad on some of it, and at the same time, I'm not that sad. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I think the video that we did 2 weeks ago, I think accurately reflected how you and I feel right now. We had a debrief. If you haven't, we'll link to the previous one on this video. Should be one of the last videos. I'll make sure it comes up at the end of like, hey, click this one. I think that's one of those things that we'd said, yeah, if this happens, then great. If it doesn't happen, then the world's not over. This was not, I don't know. You and I both said going to this was not a moment that was going to reflect and say, hey, Southern Baptists are no longer conservative based on this. And so, I feel pretty good. I wish I was going all the way for my cousin Dan Spencer to make it across the finish line. He was this close, but
Yeah.
runner up. So we should draft him again next year, maybe, just for fun. But no, for the most part, man, it was a solid, it was a good time, and it was not one of those things. We just have to talk about it because I think that's one thing is like it's you had to have kind of been there to kind of watch how it all played out to kind of be able to debrief it. But for the most part, I thought it was a good convention.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, when I say I'm sad, it is one of those things of I was disappointed because I found myself on the losing end of several votes,
Yes,
while
we
at the
did.
same time, at the same time, it's kind of like, okay,
Yeah,
I mean, you catch your breath and you look at it, and you're like, but even on a losing vote, some of those votes were communicating positions even in the minority, and so a lot of good was done. The 85 plus missionaries for the IMB send
no
off is
doubt.
always just incredible. Uh, just so many good things. Just seeing the organized chaos of 11,000 messengers in the world's biggest business meeting
Yeah,
always brings me joy. So it was good. But I think that the big things we wanted to look at were the law amendment. And
yeah.
then kind of something that we didn't really talk about much in advance was the IVF statement. I think if we go in that order, we may need to have to do a whole episode on IVF.
Maybe we do.
Um,
Yeah.
but the law amendment is what we talked about. Really, is the big issue people were prepared for. So, how do you feel about how things turned out on that one?
So this is kind of like what you and I both said, which is that here's what the thing, and I've read the headline, I've read some of the headlines, and I've had people already ask me already, like, have we opened the door to women pastors as the Southern Baptists? So let me just say first and foremost, we have not. So definitively, if you read the Baptist Faith and Message, the office of pastor is for a man. And here's where this vote went and how kind of and chime in, Andrew, if I'm missing anything here. So the point of the law amendment was just to say, look, there's certain things that we want to make sure will make it easier and it's more specified for our credentials committee to be able to determine whether churches are in good standing with the Southern Baptist Convention. We already affirm that you cannot be a Southern Baptist church and be egalitarian. You can't. We are a complementarian, which means that, that we have, that men and women complement each other, but their roles are not the same. They're not equal. And so we don't believe that you can have women pastors and men pastors. Like God's created order is the husband is the head of the family. He's the head of the wife. And there's a man who's the head in the church. Christ is the head over the church, right? And so that's the framework that we come from. And we don't pull that out just because we're patriarchal, but we're patriarchal because that's where the scriptures command. It's in the creative order of how God designed things. That being said, the law amendment was going to take that wording that we have in our Baptist Faith and Message and was going to say, let's make that something that's super clear so that when anything comes up to the Credentials Committee, it was going to say, if you have a pastor of any kind, that it has to be a man, that you can't have. Law amendment wanted to make it very clear that we shouldn't have women associate pastors and women children's pastors. And that's kind of the chaos to kind of set this all up, right? And I'll throw it back to you in a sec. We do have a crisis of not really knowing what words mean in our convention, right? We have pastors for this and ministers for that. And so we really just fling those things around. And I think, at least with the law amendment guys are pretty sure and pretty concise on here's what that should mean. And I think that's a good thing. I think that we should be very clear on what the office of pastor means. But what we see is that in our convention, there's a lot of like, well, we think that, every SBC church should say the pastor has to be the preaching pastor is the preaching, teaching pastor, the lead pastor is a man. But where it gets squishy, and it has been for some churches, is they have no problem saying, but outside of those passages, there's some freedom to say, hey, we could have a female children's pastor or something like that. And the law amendment wanted to say, hey, that's not what we're going to call them. We can't do that. We're not going to go squishy this way. And so that was what was at stake. Are we going to affirm that it should just be across the board? We have our titles right. We have our functions right. Then that we affirm what a pastor is. So that's kind of what that was, but that failed. That didn't change anything in terms of what we believe and what we do right now. I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, and you use the language of patriarchy. I just would like to say we are expressly complementarian. You've already said that when you use patriarchy. I think you were referring to the fact that we have a hard stance on male only office of pastor. Just unless you want to say that you're a full blown patriarchist.
No, patriarchal in the sense of that's what it means for complementarian.
Just because that's a whole fight on egalitarian.
That's another one.
Yeah. So I wanted to just throw that out there so that you don't get hate mail.
No, it's okay.
Any mail's good sometimes, when you have
clarifying things. Go for it.
So, I think the real issue and Rick Warren really kind of brought up this as his defense, that Ephesians 4 lists those that God gives and pastors, teachers, apostles, and others, that constitutes in his mind a gift of pastoring, that someone is gifted to shepherding or caring for a group. And under that language, which I'm not sure that that's the right verse to develop the spiritual gifting of pastoring from, the idea is that there should be a difference between the office of pastor and the role of pastoring, using a gift given to you. And so that if you have a woman who is gifted in this way and is overseeing a children's ministry or a women's ministry, she's not in the office of pastor, but she nevertheless is pastoring, caring for this small group. And so I think beneath this layer of how churches organize, you'll a lot of times have the senior pastor who's the guy, and then you'll have a staff, and then the title of pastor being used for people underneath the senior pastor is a kind of a fuzzy situation, right? So is this someone acting in the office or someone acting utilizing a gift? And so what I think the law amendment really was bringing to the table is, well, we are very clear in our documents that the office of pastor is restricted to men. And if you hold the Baptist Faith and Message, That's what it says. And it still says that. Nothing changed with the votes that took place. But for those that are looking and we're hoping for the law amendment, what this would have said is that nobody is going to have the title of pastor in a church except for a man as qualified by Scripture. We're gonna mimic that and restrict not just the office but the title, because we have a very low view of clergy in Baptist life. And so if someone has the title or someone has the function of pastoring, it's very difficult to say that that's not an office. And I think Al Mohler years ago laid this out, that you can't really separate the function and the office in our polity, because we don't have a clergy laity distinction. So this is just part of the reality of Baptist polity and how we understand the Scripture in regards to the role office of pastor. So the fact is that failed. That failed, and part of the concern was there was a big movement from those. I don't know. I don't want to say who. A large group of people were against it. A large group of people were for it. Right? It failed. The group that was against it, I think a lot of the people that were against it were concerned of the rule of unexpected consequences. You put something into the Constitution, does that tie our hands and make us be very rigid in how we deal with cases? And then there was a concern too that while you do have churches that are saying we have women elders, pastors, they're not in an office, but we've titled them because we're a little bit more generous with titles. Yeah. And this can be seen culturally, cross-culturally. Some cultures are more willing to do that. And then there was the group that was afraid that this would be perceived as an attack on women, and so they were concerned about it. My view on the way things landed is that the vast majority of Southern Baptists are still in favor of getting clarity on this. 61% said yes the second time. You needed a supermajority vote 2 years in a row to change the Constitution.
So let me stop you there, just in the
okay.
in the middle of it. So that's what I was shocked, because I had forgotten that we needed a 2/3 vote. So when I saw the totals, I said, what's the issue here? And we lost by 4 points is what it came down to. And so it's not that we lost big time. It's we lost by the 4 points needed to put us at 65% for a super majority. We missed it by that much in terms of the law amendment.
Yes. Sorry. So I think 700 votes out of 11,000 people. It was very, very close. And anybody who thinks that Baptists have gone squishy on this are misreading the tea leaves. What we have said is Jeff Orge was brought in as the president of the executive committee. Is that the right title? He's running the executive committee.
CEO of the convention. Yeah.
He is well loved in the Southern Baptist world. He has served well as the president of the Southern Baptist, the Golden Gate, now Gateway Seminary. He has served faithfully in many roles, and he came out personally and said, we shouldn't do this, that this could cause a lot of issues. And he then suggested some ways forward beyond doing this amendment to the Constitution. I think a lot of Baptists were persuaded by the reality that we have the vehicle already in place to remove people on the basis of our faith statement, that we don't need a constitutional amendment at this time to deal with this. And then I think there was a certain level of our executive committee has been in turmoil over the last few years, and we have a proven leader in place that we respect, and he has asked for us to not do this yet. You know, that's essentially the way I look at it. And I think Baptists are in a position where enough of us said, we are going to trust you to lead us through this issue. Yeah. And so now I think the pressure is on the executive committee and on our leadership to help us on this issue. Let's do. I think it may, in God's providence, he has slowed us down on this so that we can address this a little bit more carefully and slowly, to elevate the office of the pastor in the eyes of the churches and to get some clarity on our titling practices. This isn't gone by any stretch. All we have failed to do is put that language in the Constitution, which really would have tied the hands of the Credentials Committee to deal. Some of us are hungry for that to happen, and to happen now. I was in the camp that said, I'm ready for it to happen. At the same time, I am humble enough to say I may be wrong in the way that in the urgency that we move with this. Baptists are not unclear where we stand. So I'm hoping that God is going to guide us as we prayerfully follow the people that he's put in place, and as we continue to push for what we believe the Scripture teaches, that this will be handled in a way where maybe we'll have less of a fallout if we can proceed carefully and judiciously over the next year or two. And there's nowhere to read in this that Baptists all of a sudden have affirmed women pastors. That is not true. And any headline that says that is patently false from what you see. So that's kind of how I view at it. I had to kind of catch my breath and look at it, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the deal. A couple other points from that too. So like when you read the headlines, like I'm looking at USA Today, and they say Southern Baptists reject ban on women pastors. What's deceiving in that headline is we already have a ban on women pastors in our confession or in the Baptist Faith and Message. Like you will not find that. That's not where we are. It really is about. It really comes back down to that second level idea of what does it mean to have an associate or somebody under the office of the lead pastor or the elders in the church. And so so people need to just kind of recognize that. But here, you and I both know this when we were at the convention. If the vote was won, it was going to be that Baptists hate women and all that stuff. We've kicked them out of leadership, which is not the case at all. We're just affirming in the bylaws what's already in our Baptist Faith and Message. And then you have these other ones. That being said, that I think the other thing that people need to recognize, like at that meeting, and this is where I think, Andrew, I think you're right in that all there was a set of people who that didn't push us to the supermajority because they did want to defer to the leadership and trust the leadership would take care of this instead of going this route just yet, which is you see the vote that we had prior. I think was it the day prior that we booted out the one egalitarian church. And now, granted, we're supposed to use different language. We're saying they're not in friendly cooperation with us, right? That it's not that we've booted out or anything. It's all and this is what everybody should know about being a Southern Baptist is at the end of the day, every church is autonomous, and really it just means that you're not in standing with us. You're not in the same, so you're not with us. So it doesn't mean anything happens. Nobody loses anything. That just means that they're not part of the convention. Okay, that's all it means. We saw that vote, and I was trying to find out I forgot the number. I don't know if you have the number.
I just found it. Yeah, 6,759 voted to remove First Baptist Alexandria to 563.
563 votes. Yeah. So if you see overwhelmingly that we had no question when push came to shove of churches that were obviously out of step with where we are. Now, granted, that's 593 churches that are there, though, of messengers that you're like, what are you thinking, right? And so that once again shows you that that's why clarity is needed, though. And
absolutely. And I would say just because they voted no doesn't mean that they're entirely squishy. I think there's some squishiness going on. Don't get me wrong, but this church does not have a women's senior pastor. They have vocally said that they would be okay with it. And in further investigation by the Credentials Committee, they had basically a questionnaire that they came out affirming egalitarianism, even though they're not practicing egalitarianism. So we removed a church because they verbally expressed disagreement with the Baptist Faith and Message, but in their practice, they really weren't very far outside of what most of us are doing. So I could see why some of those churches said, they haven't fully crossed the line in practice, so we're not going to remove them. But that's how serious Baptists are on this. If you're going to vocally espouse something contradictory to the Baptist Faith and Message on this issue, go warm and be filled elsewhere. This is not your camp.
So to the case in point, what Rick Warren started 2 years ago when he said, we agree 99.9% with the Baptist Faith and Message, but we disagree with one word or two words. That's significant enough to where, yes, Baptists voted them out, and we voted out this church this year because those words make a huge difference. And so Baptists are very uncompromising largely on this. And so I think that's what people need to recognize is that's the full picture of what's going on. I think you're absolutely right. I think largely speaking, our convention is saying, hey, we want to trust Jeff Orge. We want to trust what the guys from our conventions are saying. Because we know them, we trust who they are, and we're going to trust that, okay, if they say the Credentials Committee can handle this without having to go that step, then let's actually see. So I think it's more of a wait and see at this point of like, do you think this is really going to get done without without needing this. And it, it might be, now there was some suspicion. One of the things that came up at convention was, how long did it take to deal with some of these churches? Like, how long did it take? And that's the thing is, I think that's what some of the law amendment guys were saying, is the reason you need it is it shouldn't take years to try to bring up somebody like this before a credentials committee. But anyways, so to me, I think that's what it is. So if you're in a Baptist church, or if you're watching and you're nervous because of the headlines, that's not what reality is. We are not. And and I'll say this too, because I am not finishing my thoughts as I say this. I think it's very easy to get nervous because we just saw what happened with the United Methodists, right? Like we just watched what happened last month with the Methodists. And so now everybody's wondering, are Baptists going this way? And I don't think there's no takeaway to say that that's where we're at on that at all. So I was pleased. I mean, really, that to me was the biggest one of that was like, but you and I both came, we said, not everything's on the line. Before we even got there, we said, this is not us just trying to like lick our own wounds or try to figure out how to make a silver lining. Like we both said that regardless of what happens, we're in a good spot as Baptists with this law amendment thing.
Yeah, every now and then I look at what we've done and on our OTX NTs, and I just am very pleased because we almost kind of wrote ourselves a letter in advance about how to process this and not get defeated or negative. I thought that's why we do this, is get our thoughts out there. And I thought that our last video ended up being very helpful because we were prepared to lose this vote and not lose our minds. At the end of the day, this is not a huge movement of a drift. Now, people want to interpret it that way. But if anything, I think what the Baptists displayed is our current processes are sufficient. They're slow, right? So we may have to work on
speed of church, man. That's what it is. Speed of church.
But do we really want to expedite removing churches, long-standing churches? It took 2 years, I think, roughly to remove First Baptist Alexandria. They're almost a charter member of the Southern Baptist Convention. This was a long-standing church. It's sad, but we're not sad that they're gone. We're sad that they fell out of agreement with us. And, maybe God will continue to do good work through them, but we now believe they're in error, and it's hard for us to do missions work together at this time. So there's plenty of churches that they'll partner with and continue. I would hope that they would reinstate biblical teaching and maybe even come back someday. But they're not heretics. They're not in cooperation.
Yeah, and that's a key. Is that's when we're saying that we're not in fellowship anymore. It really, it's the video that we did back a couple weeks ago too, when we're just seeing, what is it, was it the cooperation team?
Yeah, cooperation group. Yeah,
cooperation group. It's really just saying, look, we just recognize that this is who we are definitively as SBC, and it's the same reason. Like, so because if we had churches that were baptizing infants, we would have issue, and they'd probably be brought up, and they'd probably be booted out because that's not who we are. Doesn't mean that we break and say that they're heretics or that God's not working through them, but we have some big disagreements of what that means. And it just means that we're not going to be funding missionaries and church planters who do this, right? Like we don't want trustees who are, and by the way, that's another takeaway of one of the things that we saw come out of there, right? Is the affirmation. Two big things I thought were really important. Two big things was, we in that meeting also affirmed that every trustee needs to be a BFM 2000, has to affirm that now, which is key because not everybody in the convention affirms Baptist Faith and Message 2000, right? Was it 1963? Is that the other one? And so there are some who say, and that's, there's some who just say, no, I'm not a 2000 guy, I'm a 63 guy. But you have to affirm 2000 to be a trustee now. And found out even with NAM will not plant churches with, at least that's what came from the floor when I was there, because there were guys saying, hey, we're 1963 BFM. How come you won't plant churches? And NAM says our policy is only to work with churches that affirm 2000. And so there's some big pieces to that, that I think we're holding the line on that. And that's just stuff that's not in the cool headlines that make for readers. Nobody gives a rip when it says, we make trustees affirm, because that's not what's selling. That's not getting clicks, but that's important for us as Baptists for sure.
Yeah. If anything, in a lot of these ways, the Southern Baptist Convention moved further to the right on a lot of these issues as a result of this convention, even though the law amendment failed to pass.
Yeah.
Now, right, left, I don't always like that dichotomy, but we've moved in a
Yeah.
stronger position on this issue than we were before. And we're 24 years into the BFM 2000, right? It seems about every 40 years we revise our BFM, and we're on the back half of this. If it goes 40 years, it would, in my mind, it's time to say SBC's a 2000 group now. Okay,
Yeah.
nobody's out there saying I'm still holding on to the 1925. All right,
Yeah.
so the 63, I understand that that's kind of where the Baptist General Convention of Texas went, and of course they've added statements to their belief system because they had to address the issues of the culture that were addressed in 2000, but they weren't prepared to do it at that time or in that way. So everybody has to address the culture in ways and with precision of language. But I think we're at a time now where we really do have to kind of say, it's 2000, Baptist Faith and Message. We're 24 years past, right? We're closer to a revision of the Baptist Faith and Message than we are to when it was last passed. So let's deal with that. So the law amendment failed. I think it would have really just hit this issue hard, and it would have probably resulted in churches leaving the convention, and it would have given us a lot of bad press, and people would have left on a misunderstanding in many ways as well. Just in the, so maybe God has slowed us down, and maybe that is the right course of action. So I would prayerfully look at this and say, all right, there's still an issue, but let's just continue to work it. So I look back at Jeff Orge's statement, and I see the 2 points that I really think are essential. Number 3, I think, is the most essential, which says, let's persuade people about the unique role of pastors and the importance of preserving that title for specific functions. Not every church leader is a pastor. We need to do more than change titles. We need to elevate the pastoral role so that it towers above other leadership roles in title, calling, function, and stature. Amen. Let's continue to do that, because even the law amendment only really addressed the titling. It didn't really address people functioning without the title. And so I think that the group that was against it, you have won the time to now do it in this way. And if we can accomplish this, it probably would be a better way. So let's not say we won and move on, because Southern Baptists aren't moving on from this issue. I think Al Mohler had a tweet saying this will come back. But the reality is, I think it would be better. It would be better if we could carefully move the churches that are misusing this title to cease to do that and to understand the distinction. And if we could do that over the next 3 to 5 years and not have a giant rift, it would be nice, and we could focus on higher priority things such as reaching the lost for Christ. So
and I just think that with this, you're absolutely right, that we just recognize that, like, it's going to come back. I do think that it's a good time for all churches to look and say, what do I believe about the office of pastor? What do I believe about the titles? And how do we biblically reflect that, what we've got? And I do think it's time for churches to really rein in our use. And I think that should happen regardless of whether there's ever going to be a constitutional amendment or not. Like, you should see, are we too loosey-goosey with the title? And here's the other thing, and I really hate the pragmatism that we see sometimes come with it of, well, we should give this title because, well, we gave it to them and they need this for that benefit or whatnot. Like, no, we have that title for a reason. And so here's the other thing. If you're going to use that title and it's going to matter, then there are going to be implications for what does that truly mean to be a pastor when you have that title. So I think across the board, we should be very careful going forward. And I think it's just a good time to reflect. So like I said, good time on the law amendment stuff. Easy, So you want to move on to the president vote?
If you've got time, we can do it.
Let's do it. Let's talk about the presidential vote. So there were 6 candidates in the presidential vote. This was not really a one liberal, one conservative kind of a thing. Really, it was a crowded field. And truth be told, everybody kind of had their own candidates, even guys who were in similar camps. they were running like two guys, you know, and so it wasn't clear who they wanted for in particular. What I was seeing as I was kind of looking online of like from the chatter that I was seeing is there were people that were kind of the camps that kind of developed for the most part was, do you support what we're trying to do with the law amendment or not? And then there were some that were from, maybe more tied into the abuse task force.
Yeah.
And that kind of gave them their credentials. Um, and so, what happened though is you have to have more than 50%. So of course, within the first six, nobody got 50%. So we had to go to a runoff. And did we do it 3 times or just twice? Was it 3? It was
I think there were 3 total votes.
Three
two,
total
two
votes.
runoffs. Yeah.
So then in the second time, we pared it down to 3 candidates. And I'll say this, that like I said, there was no like consensus candidate necessarily, right? Everybody kind of had it was not clear. I mean, we're all looking around each other like, who is it? And I saw some people at the end of the day, as I was looking at it too, some people were like, well, I'm voting for this guy because he supports this or that. And I'm like, well, okay, but just because they support the amendment does not necessarily mean, like, to me, those were almost like separate issues, right?
Yeah.
Of we're voting on the amendment, that's going to happen or if not based on the vote of the people, not necessarily who we put in there. And so I don't know if that was because we just wanted to reward, but like I looked at who I voted for me, I voted for my cousin, Dan, because I know Dan, I know where Dan's at. And I trust Dan. I've had conversations with Dan prior to all of this. I know where he's at. I understand where he's at. And even though we might differ on certain things, I knew I felt fully comfortable supporting him all the way through because I knew where he was at. And so that's why I voted on that. But like, it was weird at the very end of it. It's like, it was nobody was, I don't think anybody was like, oh no, we went home, we lost. Like there was nothing like that. I think most people are generally like, okay, it's fine. It was not a like contentious, it was just a crowded field. I think that's all I can say. It was just a pretty crowded field, but nothing was high stakes. It didn't feel like we got to get this guy in or not. I think everybody's kind of happy with what happened.
Yeah. I think you had 6. I think you kind of had 2 on one side and 2 on the other and 2 toward the middle. And what you see, I think, is that the Baptists aren't really being yanked in either direction right now. So the 2 guys kind of, and of course, Dan came out late and nobody saw him coming. I think, I think Clinton was a little surprised. Clinton was surprised, because he'd been out there. I think he was a pretty, a lot of people expected him to do well in the vote, and he ended up winning. But Dan came up from behind and or came in late. Sorry,
he
and
was a late contender for sure.
So you lost the 2 folks on kind of. And I don't know that they're on the extreme, but they were represented by, say,
and that comes down to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes on these presidential votes, you just have to look at sometimes you have to look at who's recommending them. And you're like, okay, if they're recommended, then I can see that they're one way or the other. But I think you're right. It was more of a middle of the road, nothing crazy. There's nothing that you can say, oh man, we lost it or anything like that. I think it was just it was a good time, good vote. I mean, I left really just, I'll say this, I left really just having way more respect for who the last president was, Bart Barber, over the last 2, because of how he handled himself and held himself in those meetings. Just very humble, gracious, and like entertaining too. So that's my bet. Like at the end of the day, I was like, man, we had a good president who really conducted himself well in that business meeting, and it was he made it very enjoyable to be there.
Absolutely. Bart Barber is a treasure, I think. And like he even said, he's not perfect, but he's tried to represent us well, and I think he has. And of course, if you're dealing with factions and who you side with, I was on the Tom Askell side, right? But at the same time, those 2 brothers treat each other like brothers in Christ, and I like to see that, because you realize that we're really in the same team. We're Southern Baptist, we're on the evangelical ship. So that's always encouraging to see, and to not see the pettiness just overrule everything.
Yeah.
And there's a few things that he's done that I would say I'm not sure about this, that, or the other, but he's done a really good job. And one of the things I saw him post was one of the questions that I never see asked of a presidential candidate is, when was the last time you moderated a business meeting?
Yeah.
And I thought that was so funny and true, you know, because we do really want our presidents to elect good people to the committee on committees. That's the most important thing. But beyond that, you know, knowing how to run a business meeting is really the job that he does. And if you don't know how to do it, it really is kind of a bit, you can make a bit of a mess. And he really does a good job, and he really supports the messengers in a way that you just you like him, you know. And
Yeah.
so kind of sad to see him go from that role. I don't know a whole lot about Clint, and I'm sure he's not a perfect candidate or president, because none of us are.
Yeah.
But let's pray for him as he leads us in this next phase.
Well, well said. Well said. Hey, so I think in terms of time, we're going to need to make a part 2 on the IVF thing. I think we should have a full thing about IVF, because not only is that something that I think we came with a strong statement on, but it's a huge cultural issue. It's a political issue right now
Yes.
too. So part 2 of this will be in IVF. But to close us out, let's talk about what was the last big one that was at least a big movement vote that was coming, which was related to what? It was to
The ERLC.
ERLC. Yeah. So explain that one. That was another kind of moment that was important. It was a big moment that people need to know about too, probably didn't read about.
Yeah. So the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission is one of our entities, and its job is to represent Baptists to Washington in the political sphere. So I think following the luncheon on Tuesday with the Center for Religious Leadership and founders and some others, they put on, Meg Basham came because she's got a new book called Shepherds for Sale that's coming out. And she discovered that there is a lot of money funneled from billionaires that aren't not necessarily fans of Baptists, but it's trickling its way through different NGOs and entities into groups that Baptists get involved with, you know, on commissions on immigration and different things. And the stated purpose of some of these groups is to shift our denomination, and evangelicals in particular, to the left politically on some of these issues. And so that speech was very, very powerful and moving. And I think some of it was shocking. And Tom Askell ended up bringing a motion in the next motion session to abolish the ERLC. And so the big reason for this is that many Baptists feel like the ERLC has been representing Baptists more in a liberal bent on some of these issues. And the biggest issue that was a frustration was there was a total abortion ban that would have demanded equal treatment under the law in Louisiana. And pro-life groups, including the ERLC, signed a letter saying that we would never support laws that would criminalize women for an abortion. Well, many of us are coming to the recognition that if there isn't equal provision for the child, if mom chooses to abort medically, then there's no way to stop abortion. So this is a difficult issue, and we'll have to get into this maybe at a different thing. But most Southern Baptists believe that we want to stop abortion altogether, and the only way to do that is through personhood legislation. And so our own ERLC kind of worked against us in Louisiana. And we feel like they've worked against us on some other issues. And so he moved to abolish the ERLC, which requires 2-year majority vote. So we voted on that. And how did it go? I mean, it was
a big vote. So it didn't pass, but the point was, and people were all over the page on that. I think really here's the point of that was, and I felt for even when it was under Richard Land, and I like Richard Land, but I feel like even when it was Richard Land, there's always stuff because it deals with politics. You know, there's always things that you're like, man, that doesn't represent me. And I think people get frustrated over that kind of stuff. And I do think there needs to be some accountability and some questions for some of that stuff of like, okay, so what did we do there with Louisiana? Because that was one that got a lot of people scratching their heads on some of that. You know, it was one of those things that at least it was a very, while it didn't pass, you could look at the room and say that was a big vote. And you have to look and see that people, I guess what I would say is that people want some accountability. People want it to be known of like, hey, this is a serious thing, and we want to see our interest represented. And so, yeah, it didn't pass, but when you saw the motions that the people put up, it was a big chunk. There was it was not a small little group of people. And so I still think that was a big deal. And it's a big deal that it keeps coming up too. But like I said, it's a tough spot to be in, because it's intertwined, and it's going to deal with politics, and we are so split when it comes to political stuff too. But yeah, so those were some big moments for sure. Really the highlight, I think you stated at the very beginning, to me, one of the highlights is the 85 missionaries that we sent out. That really keeps a good tone for what was all about. It's a great reminder of like, hey, we do this because of that. Like we have these meetings, and ultimately it shouldn't be lost that like what we're here to do is to send these people out, and what we're here to do is to do our jobs where we're at. And like that every one of us should look at ourselves as like a missionary planted in our own community. And that's one of the things I love about Southern Baptist conventions. Like you go there, and as crazy as it might be, sometimes as tense as things might be, you leave saying, at the end of the day, it's all about what I do at my church and how do we accomplish the Great Commission here. And that's what I love about being autonomous. We can bring things up, we can vote on things, but at the end of the day, it's about what are we doing in our community and in our church. So that's what I felt like in a good meeting. But man, I want to talk about some of the IVF stuff next. I think that was super helpful and something we need to think through as well.
Yeah, and that's something people don't think about until they're trying to get pregnant, and then they look at what's out there. And so a lot of folks haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this. And so I think it's good that we've got a statement on it, and it warrants our attention, because that was the one that the media grabbed onto as well, because it is a political football right now. And so a lot of us weren't prepared for that one. I didn't know it was coming. So, it was, I think it's a good statement.
It's a good statement.
I'm excited to talk more about it. But overall, I have no reason to feel like I should leave the SBC or leave my church to do that. I think that it's not perfect, nor has it ever been, but God is still using the Southern Baptist Convention for a lot of good and to impact the world for Christ. And so I'm proud to be a part of it. And it's always fun, that just I just am in awe. You get to sing with all of these people in worship, and then see our missionaries. You just realize, my church couldn't afford to support one missionary, and we're a part of sending full-time missionaries across the world. It's because we work together. So anyway, I'm excited about it. I think it's good. I look forward to next year in Dallas, and if you are excited, plan on coming to Dallas. It'll be another good time. It should be a good sized group, I assume. And maybe it'll be a calm, quiet meeting. We haven't had one of those in a little bit, but I suspect we'll have fun things to talk about.
There's always, just give it 6 months. We'll find out what we're talking about. So, but I will say, if you go to a Baptist church, talk to your pastor about going. Every church gets a slate to go. Some are bigger than others. The max is 12, despite the size of your church. It's about how much you give, is your percentage. And so big churches, small churches, we can all send people. And so if you'd like to go, you get to experience it, get to be edified, encouraged. It's a good place to go for that, and it'd be part of what's going on. If you're concerned about the direction of our convention, that's where you've got to be. And your church needs to go and send people. And here's something: if you got little kids, there's childcare. That's another thing. People don't know that necessarily. There's childcare at the convention, and it's great childcare. It's good. It's a good time. So, all right, that's all I got too. So I'm grateful for my church sending me. I know you're grateful for your church being able to send you guys. And so thank you if you're part of Oak Valley. Thank you if you're part of North Swan for sending us to be able to go. And to be able to be there, to be part of the business of the future of the church, and just to get to play a role in that. So appreciate that for sure.
All right, you want to close this out?
Let's do it, man. Let's finish up with the priestly blessing number 6. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor on you and give you peace. God bless. Thanks for watching.
Take care.